All right. Guess we'll get started now. Thanks for joining us, Ian.
Certainly.
For those of you who don't know, Ian works or owns Magic Meeple Games. He's made a number of games over the years. He can probably do a better introduction of himself than I can. So I'll let him do that.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Ian Stedman. Thank you very much for having me here. I can see some of you back there. I apologize, I don't have a webcam set up. I'm just screen sharing for now. But let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I am the co-owner and chief creative officer at Magic Meeple Games. Previously, we were known as GU Games and Gamers University. We did a whole bunch of different things related to games, including game design and publishing, but it was not our focus as it is now. I graduated from NAU with my BSBA in 2006. I am a published game designer, both professionally and self-published. I self-published a few games of my own through the Game Crafter, and one of my later designs was picked up by Clever Mojo Games. It was published 2 years ago. Magnum Opus was that game, and then we recently finished the Kickstarter for Dark Rock Ventures. I have been a game designer, and I have done semi-official or official rulebook playtesting and consulting for the past 7 or 8 years. I've been actually making games since I was a little kid and took it seriously as I grew older. Formerly, I was an IT guy. I did a lot of desktop support and junior system administration, lots of technical document writing. I'll tell you who I'm definitely not. I am not a professional writer or professional editor as a full-time gig. That's never really been my focus. It's always just kind of been something on the side that's been ancillary to what I've been doing as my primary function, what have you. So take what I say with a grain of salt. A lot of this is half science, half art. So I may say some things that contradict other things you've heard, but that's okay. That's what makes game design so beautiful. First thing I want to talk about is really what is a rule book, and that kind of has changed with the uprising of YouTube and things like Tabletop with Will Wheaton. A lot of players are now turning to YouTube to find out how to play a game rather than reading the rule book. So what that really says is that your rule book is pretty much your player's last resort option to learn how to play your game. So if they're not getting taught by a friend or going to a demo at a convention or a local game store or watching a video on YouTube, that's pretty much the last place they'll turn to actually, to sit down, grind in, and learn how to play. Pardon me. So in that endeavor, it has to be perfectly clear, or the game can't be played, at least not to the designer's expectations. The measure of is a game good or are you playing it right to a lot of people is, well, are you having fun? And, that's kind of philosophical whether they need the rule book or not. But if they want to play to your designer's expectations the way you envision them to, they got to be able to understand it. And that goes for every stage of development. The game should always have some form of written rules, even if it's an idea you just came up with. The first thing you want to do is write an outline of how you want the game to function in case you put it on the back burner and come back to it later. You want to have always something written down so you know what you were considering doing, what you had tried, what wasn't working, so you don't go back to those things that you tried later or before. Pardon. So who is your rulebook for? The answer isn't necessarily for the players. Of course, the very final rulebook that the game publishes with is going to be for the players. But in the beginning and prototype stages, the rulebook is for you and your playtesters. So you don't have to write a document that you can drop on someone else's lap and expect them to know how to play the game at this stage. The most important thing is that you have something to refer back to and that it makes sense to you and the people that are actually playing. This is especially important if you are changing rules often. It's easier to change some notes, some bullet points on a sheet of paper than retyping a bunch of paragraphs and formatting and, go into Microsoft Word to type in everything in, perfect speech. That's not necessary until the later stages. The prototype and playtest stage rulebooks should mostly be the basic framework for how your game works. And you want to remind yourself of things that you've discovered as you go along, things you tried and didn't work, things that you're considering changing, things that you might want to add in or take out, component notes, things that you think might be better if with a different type of component that you may not have on hand. Take care, throw all those notes in your rule book as you're going, and for each new playtest you can print a new one of those or write a new one of those, and it's a good way to have that evolving rule set in a chronological order that you can refer back to and know exactly what's going on at every stage of the rule book's evolution. So things to think about as you start writing a rule book for your game, or start refining that, quick rough copy scratch that you've been using as notes, because these kinds of things tend to come up toward the very end of the process, and that can be troublesome if it was a lot of stuff that, I didn't think of that, and if you know about them and keep them early or in mind early on, you can actually save a lot of work at the end. And these are just some of the favorite things I look for when I'm working on rule books. The first thing you want to look at is language dependency. If you are creating a game for children, obviously the manner of speech you're going to have to work with is a little bit more limited. They don't understand as large words, things like that. You got to make it accessible to your target. So if you're considering a game that has a high language dependency, there's really no good way around that. If there's a lot of text in your game and on your cards and on your board, but if you can distill that down to symbols as much as you can, those can be multilingual. So the only thing that really needs to be translated is what those symbols mean in each language, and you can save a lot of trouble if you're in a region where they speak two different languages, or if you plan on trying to distribute or sell the game overseas. Another thing you want to think about is establishing consistent and coherent nomenclature. And what I mean by that is take every thing in your game and consider it like its own defined object. So you have your quest deck. Always refer to that as a quest deck and never the deck of quest cards or the cards with the quests or any other way. Make sure that every proper noun is referred to exactly the same way every time you cite it in the book, and it will alleviate a whole lot of confusion. If you have more than one player role in the game, werewolf is a good example of this, also known as mafia. Make sure that they're clearly defined and have names if more than one exists. If it's Monopoly, everyone is a player just playing the game. But if you have a moderator or an overseer or a storyteller or game master or dungeon master, something that differentiates what one player is doing from what another player is doing, make sure that those roles are defined and those names are stuck to every time they're referred to. Rule variations. At the beginning of a game's design, you're probably focusing on making the core of the game hum and run smoothly as much as possible. But if you see an opportunity for any rule variations or different methods of play that people can use with the same components and theme that you have, consider doing so. Make a footnote and come back to it later. Something that's really popping up right now on games, especially in the Kickstarter world where I tend to work a lot, is extra game variations getting added on as stretch goals in the campaign. If you've got a good competitive game that you can tweak a little bit and make it a completely different cooperative experience, people are loving that. So take a look at what you're building, the pieces you're actually physically holding, and consider this machine that you're constructing and how else can it be tooled and used to kind of suit the most player preferences and tastes at once as you can. Another thing, quick reference tools. So if you were able to give every player a blackjack size playing card with bullets of the most important rules in the game, and in most cases, of course, you should do this, what would it say? What if you were able to give them a 3x6 card instead, or include something on a player map if that's something that your game requires? What would those things say? Try and boil the most important things down so you can quickly deliver the core concept of the game and then expand upon that to kind of make a quicker onboarding experience for people who are new to the game. If you've got a large group of people and maybe one person that's new, that can be indispensable for bringing them up to speed very, very quickly. Another thing is the mode of address that you choose to use in your rules. So active and passive voice actually, I'm not sure if I included the link at the end of this presentation, but there was a really cool discussion on LinkedIn that I was a part of recently where somebody asked about this mode of address and active voice versus passive voice, because in Europe, actually, there are some preferences that differ between American audiences and European audiences. A lot of American editors, pardon me, I'm going to get some water here. A lot of American editors, according to this individual who wrote this piece, have been returning pieces to him after editing that have changed the instruction, say the roll the dice, to the dice are rolled. And you always want to just give the player direct instructions, just as if you're speaking to them directly. That will actually make your rules a little bit shorter. It'll make them cleaner, and it'll make them easier to understand in a lot of ways. There are some exceptions to that rule, and some people will argue about that till, all night long. But the easiest way to think about that is as if it were a technical manual. Like if you were giving them the quick instructions to use their laptop, just very specific: open the lid, press this button, wait for this to appear. Those clear and concise directions can go a really long way, instead of a paragraph of text, which is essentially saying the exact same thing. So the composition or anatomy of a rulebook clearly varies from game to game to game. But if you've got more than one page of a rulebook, the first thing that you want to see, obviously, is the title. The first thing I want to know about the game is what it's called, and then this is kind of a point of contention. A lot of companies and designers and publishers want to put a very brief credit section in this point. I don't necessarily agree to that, but it's kind of a personal taste. So kind of find your comfort zone. If your credit section is exceptionally long, like if you plan to list all of your playtesters out and give a lot of acknowledgments, definitely save it to the end. But if you just want to drop a designed by, developed by, published by, illustrated by, graphic design by, this can be a good place to put it. But without question, the very next thing that should be in there is the number of players the game accommodates, the age range, and the estimated playtime. After that, I want to know what I'm supposed to see in the box, so you want to put the list of components next. And after that, I like to see a quick and flavorful summary of the game experience. Tell the players what they're doing and why they should care about it. Why do they want to do what they're doing? And then tell them what they need to do to win. Because what comes next is, okay, well, what am I going to need to do to make that happen? And if you tell them how to win right away, they'll be much more engaged, I've found. Everything after that, you want to put the setup next. So tell them how to set up the game. Of course, a picture is worth 1,000 words in this regard. Definitely have a full image of the complete setup. And what's really helpful too is if you do numbered callouts for each component of the game, and okay, so you have a little 1 over the dice, you can declare that as the dice. This can actually be tied to your list of components in a lot of ways. If you choose to do that and put that all on page 1, that's also a good way to do it. And then, of course, your explanation of setup would come later on. After that, tell me how to play the game. This is a really important part. So I want to know definitions all the different, if you've got different decks of cards, what are they all called? What should each one look like, so I can find them easily? If there's different player roles, you can define them here. The phases of play, the sequence of play, make sure that they're all defined and named. And if there are any special cases that don't really fall into any other section or the sequence of play, or how a specific event occurs in your game, make sure you give it its own little section. In the event of, in Monopoly, it needs its own little section for how jail works, because it's kind of different from how the rest of the machine operates. So keep those in mind and kind of break those out into their own sections so they can be referred to very easily. After that, how, why, and when does the game end? And tell me who wins and why. So if you're gonna have the game end under very specific conditions, definitely put those then in here. If you want to have the game end after a certain amount of time, or after a player accomplishes a certain goal, this is where you want to tell us how that happens. After that is a great place to put where your variants are. And the best way to add rules variants in the books is to just tell me what's different, and then close it with all other rules are unchanged. That is the best way that I find that I'm able to learn about new variants, because it just tells me the information I need to know. I actually feel kind of frustrated sometimes when I see rules variants that explain to me the entire game again with just a couple of sentences that are different. There's really no sense in that. It's just wasted ink and paper. So it's safe to assume that if someone's playing a variant, that they'll have a core understanding of the game already. That is kind of by design for a variant. So you want people to really be a master or experienced and familiar with the core of the game, and then explore those more complex or more varied experiences that kind of spice it up a little bit more. After that, go ahead and do your credits and legal. Anything you put in the beginning, definitely repeat here if you used a brief credit section in the beginning. So your designers, developers, artists, graphic designers, any honorary producers you might have. I really like it when all the playtesters are listed in the rulebook. It kind of gives it a little more personality and personal feel to me. This is a personal preference. I don't really stand with the recommendation of printing all Kickstarter backers' names in a rule book. That leads to a lot of problems with people submitting the correct spellings of their names, and if they want something different printed, or if it was a gift for someone else, there's a lot of work involved in that, and a lot of people are dissatisfied and upset. But all your playtesters, it's safe to assume that you've had personal contact with them, you've gotten feedback from them about the game, you know who they are, and people really like that kind of acknowledgement. And special thanks and things at the end, people that supported you along the way, people that sorry about that. People that have helped you along the way, helped you design the game, helped inspire you, definitely put those at the end there as well. But don't put any of that on the back page, because the back page is your prime real estate. The only thing more important than the cover of your rulebook, in my opinion, is what is on the back of it. It's the most accessible thing that can be grabbed quickly for rapid information. That's not being occupied by what should be pretty, the front cover. So going back to that blackjack size card or 3x5 card, the things that you would really want players to know during the game and have access to at all times, what can you put in the back of the cover that the players are going to need to refer to most often? Maybe you went with a symbol-driven design that has a lot of symbolic definitions. The back cover is the perfect place for that. It can be passed around for each player on their turn, and if they need extra information about anything they see on that back page, they can just flip open the book and start looking at it. So think about, what would be best for that. If you've got a particularly complex round sequence, that can go on there. Or what do I do? What can I do when it is my turn? Remind people how to win. Symbol definitions, as I said there. whatever the most complex thing is in the game, the most complex mechanism, that's a good thing to go on the back page. Or if nothing else, use that space for a quicker, more brief game setup. Put your diagram on there with the quick definitions and a quick play setup if you've got room for that. A lot of rule books are appearing with frequently asked questions sections, and to me that does not make a lot of sense, because if you have not published the rule book, your frequently asked questions should be part of the rule book. So an FAQ should be designed for things that the rulebook missed. And my favorite home for living documents of the FAQ variety is Board Game Geek. There are file sections that can be attached to any game in particular with updated information, errata, things like that. So if you design a game and it's it's out there and something is particularly confusing, or heaven forbid there was a mistake in the rulebook, go ahead and throw a document up there and then just keep updating it with a version number so you can link people to that same document every single time that they have a question for you. See, yes, if there's a fringe case that cannot be neatly explained in any other way than a question and answer format, definitely do so. But keep those things in the relevant rule sections they belong in. So like another Monopoly example, the go to jail fringe case is going to be kind of, can I do this? Answer no, and here's why. So some tips for rules revision as you follow that evolutionary process from just a bunch of bullet points on a napkin to a fully colored illustrated book. Remember that you don't have to do it alone. Definitely give your rule book to other folks who have played it and who haven't played it to make sure it's coherent and makes sense. Because someone who's played the game before may have a different perspective and gloss over something that may not really make sense in text, but because they understand it firsthand, they may not see that as a point of revision for that rule. Definitely print a physical copy of your rules for every new playtest session that you have if you've typed it, and write all over it every single time. I kind of touched on this earlier, but you definitely want to keep just a living evolution, kind of a designer journal almost, of all the notes and things and ideas that you've collected along the way. And it makes it really, really easy to refer back to when you do that, and just keep evolving the document and put it in a 3-ring binder, keep it with you with a copy of the prototype, and it helps a lot. In text, paragraphs are very boring and difficult to scan, so turn anything you can into a bulleted list or a numeric sequence of steps. This would probably be my number one tip for a lot of people trying to write rules, because they want to tell me a story, and that's cool for maybe like the first page. But then I want to know how to play as quickly as possible. I want to do my thinking playing the game. I don't want to burn my brain out trying to figure it out. So simplify, use good use of the space you have to make charts whenever possible, lists, anything visual that can help people break down big pieces of information into little chunks. Clarity versus brevity. You definitely want to err on the side of clarity. It can be frustrating to have a rule that can only be explained with a lot of lengthy text, but it's better to have that lengthy text that you are absolutely sure someone else will understand than try to kind of cut corners and save yourself a sentence by being even a little bit vague. You should definitely ask your playtesters if they feel that any rules could be explained more efficiently. A great way to kind of test this is if you are working with a mechanism that that appears in any other games, take a look at their rule books and see how they explain those rules to see if they maybe did it in a way that is more effective for your purpose, or if you can find a way to modify the way they said it to be even better. And also check for redundancies. If you're explaining the same thing in more than one place, try and find those and get rid of them so people are going to the same place in the rulebook for the same pieces of information every single time. Keep in mind it's a technical document. It doesn't have to impress your English literature professor, but it has to make sense and deliver accurate directions. So if your rules are more understandable because you're not using proper sentences and complete, English and punctuation, it's not necessarily because you did something wrong. If it really is easier to understand that way, that's okay. Just leave it. Things that are awesome from a player's perspective: rule books that have diagrammed with numbered callouts or lettered callouts for each item, aspect, zone, area, whatever different nouns you have in the game. If you can call those all out to me with a visual representation, I love it. Oxford commas save lives. Always use that Oxford comma. If you've got an ordered list, put a comma before that "and" every single time, because if you don't, people will become confused every time. It's not good. Flowcharts. I can't remember what game it was because I would really, really like to credit the designer that did it the first time I saw it. But flowcharts they're bloody brilliant for explaining rules, especially for round sequence. If you've got different options that then affect what the player's next choice is, flowcharts are beautiful, especially if you can put it on, like we were saying before, that blackjack size card, the 3x5 card, something for what can I do on my turn, or how does a turn work. If you can turn that into a flowchart for people, it will get positive response. People are loving that. Symbol-driven game systems, we talked about that earlier. If you can distill, things down to a symbol or, a close second, keywords, like Magic the Gathering, for example, uses tons of keywords on their cards that advanced players will understand, and the more common cards will explain in greater detail. So if you can think of that as, just each of those keywords that Magic uses, turning them into a symbol, kind of translate that into what you're trying to accomplish with your game. And it will actually improve the visual aspects of the design as well, making both the rule book and the final product of the game a lot cleaner and visually pleasing. Players and publishers love short rule books. If your game is simple enough that it can be explained in 1 or 2 pages, awesome. People love games that they can learn quickly and jump into very quickly. It's kind of a trend in the market right now. People are kind of looking for inexpensive games. They can take a brand new one to every weekly game night, and if it sits on their shelf after that, no big deal, because they only paid $18 plus shipping for it, what have you. So short rule books are cool. Big thick rule books that are kind of weekend killer games, they have their place too. But if you've got one like that, consider giving it an index or a glossary. If your rule book is longer, maybe not even 15 pages, I'd say even 10 pages long, put a glossary toward the end of the book for all the key terms, and toward the end of the revision stage, each of those little entries can be given a page number so people can find those rule explanations very, very quickly on the fly. That's all I've got for now. I'd like to open it up for questions, but not before thanking you all for having me. This is very cool to get this invitation from Jeremy. I appreciate it very, very much. And if you have any, offline questions for me, go ahead and hit me up on Facebook or Twitter. I'll go ahead and send a copy of these slides over to Jeremy as well, so you guys can have all of these notes and these hyperlinks as well. These articles are very, very cool for getting rid of a lot of kind of junk and fiddliness that occurs in a lot of rules as they're revised over and over and over by the same pair of eyes over and over and over. So does anyone have any questions?
Yeah. So you mentioned the glossary for longer rule books.
Yes.
About a table of contents, because sometimes it can be easier to just open the first page and see that table of contents and look up that term.
Yes, definitely. I would probably put that table of contents after the explanation, the flavorful explanation of what I'm doing in this game and why do I care, but before the setup. So yeah, if you have a table of contents in there that can explain every large section that they can refer to, that is also extremely helpful. At the back of the book, what I meant more was, if you're going to do an index or a glossary, make them the same thing, not two separate two separate lists. So if you've got one item name, the quest deck, tell me where I can find it in the rulebook and give me a little quick explanation on what this thing is. Does that help? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Anyone else?
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you have any good examples of like rule books that you think are awesome?
The rulebook for Lords of Waterdeep, I think, is very good as an example of a longer rulebook. And for a very, very short rulebook, Tiny Epic Galaxies is awesome for that. And let's see, I'm looking around my collection here. Bears has a very good one-page rulebook. That's kind of an obscure game. Let's see, where... Oh, I don't want to cite another Tiny Epic game. The Tiny Epic series has really good, very short, concise rulebooks. A lot of Scott Alm's smaller games do as well.
What is this Bears game?
Bears, yes, it's from Fireside Games. It's a little dice game. I believe the rules are on a little piece of paper.
Interesting.
A lot of games you might find in a toy store, things from Hasbro, have actually quite good one-page rulebooks in most cases as well, provided that they're full color and they're using images to help explain the game. Because some of them do come with black and white rulebooks that don't really have anything valuable on them except text, and that's kind of boring. It's effective, but it's boring.
So, like, what do you think about, I guess, like, people, I guess, a game designer making, like, a YouTube video for their game as, like, a rule book?
Absolutely. More and more I'm seeing rule books come with a little icon on the front cover that says, stop, here's the link for the video, how to play video. A lot of them even have a QR code, too. If that's something that you have the capability to do from the outset, definitely do so, especially if you're pitching your game to different publishers. Publishers love to see a how-to video instead of having to read through a bunch of rules to figure out how to play your game. If you want them to play your game quickly, give them a video. And actually, I've discovered a tool in Tabletop Simulator for that endeavor. Making a simulation for your game in Tabletop Simulator, getting a free copy of Fraps or something, some kind of screen capture software. Just get a mic, run through it in Tabletop Simulator, manipulate all your parts, zoom in real close on the points that need to be zoomed in on, and that is a very easy way to make a very flavorful, visually stimulating how to play without a huge camera setup and lots of people to help.
That's a good idea.
So if your game has you have your round structure section.
Yes.
Like sub steps within that. You say it's like a worker placement game. There's like a million different places you can go. Rather than should you explain all of those in order, or should you have a brief summary of all the steps and then go into more detail?
I prefer a brief summary of all the steps, and if they want to drill down into more detail, have subsections for those appropriately. So you've got say for instance a 5-phase round. You got phase 1. I'll use Dark Rock Ventures as an example. Phase 1, roll the dice. Phase 2, everyone assigns their workers. And in that section, I would explain, okay, so this is what it means to assign your workers. These are the different places you can assign your workers to. And these are all the things that they can do. If you want to kind of put a summary in the beginning with just your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are what the names of the phases are. And then after that, break each one out into the greater detail, what everything is. Here are all your options, and here are the different spaces you can assign your people to in those longer segments.
Okay. Kind of related to that, if you have an instance where there are variable player powers or something, or specific card effects,
Yes.
Save all of that for the the end, or would you kind of address that if you were talking about like something else?
I would definitely put that in the end. In the kind of, I would kind of treat it as almost a glossary of its own, an explanation of each specific card and what its effects are. If it's a game that requires that kind of explanation, if you have, if you opt for a more symbol-driven design, and you can just use every card's effect as just a series, one or two symbols with some short text. And the symbols are explained in the rulebook, and then everything they need to know about the card beyond that is on the card. I don't like having to refer back to a rulebook to tell me what my cards do when the card's in my hand. Why isn't the card telling me what it does? Or at least, giving me a quick visual cue like a symbol to tell me what it does that I can look up, and then I know, okay, every time I see that same thing, I know exactly what it does.
Do you have anything that, this might be a weird question, but anything you think should not be in the rulebook? Like stuff that should almost be, because every game you're talking about cards, and that's one thing. Like, cards should be tell you. Is there anything else that you put in rulebooks that should be in there?
I apologize. I couldn't quite understand your question. I'm having some difficulty hearing you, sir.
Yeah, no, I was probably mumbling. Like, do you have anything that you think shouldn't be in a rulebook? Like, it's better served like on the board or on the cards, or just something that people put in rule books that shouldn't be there?
Besides an FAQ, nothing.
Right.
Let's see. I'm trying to really consider this and look around at games that I have played and not liked as much as others for an example of that. Okay, here's a good example. If your game requires any assembly of any kind, like if you choose to use blank dice and it comes with a set of decals that you have to apply to those dice, if you have the opportunity, make that assembly direction sheet on a separate piece of paper and put it like a big stop sign on it. Before you play, read this. And once the game's assembled, they don't really need it anymore. And if they choose to get rid of that, they can, or what have you. And yeah, that's something I see a lot of glossy paper and color ink go into rule books that for that purpose that really wasn't necessary. Not sure if there's anything else on that topic. I'm still scanning the room here. Commercials. I mean, if you're an independent publisher or a big publisher, it's just a self-published designer, don't put a bunch of ads in your rulebook. I mean, yeah, you want to tell people about your other products, but like a separate sheet, a separate product catalog.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to save for a separate document as well.
Yeah.
Think of it like this, to kind of cover anything I may not have thought of. So after your game is released, you'll want to have a copy of the rulebook available to the public, like on Board Game Geek, so they can look at it and see what your game's all about. Put only in that document what is pertinent to the game and will help them learn how to play, because some people are actually looking at that document on the internet to see if this is a game they want to buy. And if they're being inundated by assembly instructions and ads for other products in their catalog and anything that's unrelated to that, that might turn them off.
That makes sense. Yeah, I guess one thing I was just thinking of, just talking about this, is I guess any time that a designer feels they have to give a hint on how to play their game, like, what do you think about those? Like, not necessarily a rule, like the game, well, you have to do this to play the game, but just like, yeah, this power is really powerful or something like that.
Try this.
Yeah, something like that.
That's actually not a bad thing. You don't want to kind of tip your hand and say, "Hey guys, this is your first order optimal strategy. You want to do this first, and you'll win all the time." Not necessarily so much as that, as kind of say, "Hey, this is a particularly risky play, and here's why. Consider your choices very carefully."
Okay.
Just kind of guide the players, give them tips about things that you want them to consider as a designer to the player. Things that you want them to think about before making that decision, kind of clue them into that without telling them what they should do versus another choice.
Yeah.
That was kind of awkwardly worded. I apologize. Good question, though. Yes.
So something I've noticed in a couple of games, I can't remember which ones right now, but is like something was not in the rule book, but it was on a reference card. That's a big no-no, right? I mean, that seems just really stupid to me. But
yeah, if you have your quick reference cards saying anything that's not covered in the rules, then your rules aren't done.
okay, yeah.
they should your any reference cards or reference materials in the game related to how the game is played should definitely be covered in greater detail in the rule book. Never absent.
Yeah.
I got a lot of flack for
Oh yeah.
Exceptions to this rule are, of course, expansion content, which are going to have their own separate rule documents or update sheet, or maybe just a card. Who knows?
Yeah, sure.
But that's a different beast. Expansions that's a separate package, separate product. So you don't have to worry so much about that. Of course, it's going to have separate rulebook.
Yeah.
But again with that, that kind of loops back to what I was. Another thing I said earlier was, if you do write an expansion to your game, make sure you're covering the basic rules of the game only in a very brief gloss over. Hey guys, this is just a reminder. You should really know this already, and then tell me about what's new.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Well, hey everyone, thank you again for having me. This is really cool. I've never done anything like this before. I hope it wasn't too awkward and I actually helped out,
Yeah, no, this was awesome. Yeah.
Thank you again for spending some time with us.
My pleasure. It was fun.
Great. Then in that case, if we have no more questions, I guess we will let you go.
Alrighty.
Thank you again.
You're welcome. I'll send you that email with the slides so all your guys can get the links I used and anything else they might need.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a great evening, everyone.
Merry Christmas and stuff.
You as well.